Let's talk about honey trapping, the art of alluring a man in under the false pretense for sex, only to turn around and rob him or do something else far more worse. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I have been counseling victims and perpetrators of abuse for many years now. And, trigger warning. So this is a response to my post about, passport bros. So if you guys want to, click on this comment to look at that. But this person says, before the passport bros, there was military bros, especially in places like the Philippines. I observed in the mid 80s personally because it's my dad's second tour with a family at that time. And this person goes on to talk about that. But anyhow, my post yesterday was on the passport bros. There's two parts, but the major premise of it was here's a set of men that's looking to take advantage of economically disadvantaged women for sexual favors and or marriage, under in under the guise that they could sort of they there's a power difference, there's a power dynamic over there when you're dealing with economically disadvantaged women. And so I brought that post up for several reasons. One, it's an educational post, but two, to also talk about how the tables were turning on passport bros. So number one, even though passport bros are going over there to take advantage of economically disadvantaged women for sex and other types of favors, the one phenomenon that I brought up was the fact that these men are getting robbed and experiencing violence once they go over there. Again, that's called honey trapping. And I really thought that this was public knowledge. And the reason I thought it was public knowledge was because I had seen it. I believe it was on the news or some clip where it was actually like a service warning on places like Colombia and Panama and things like that. There's also actually a film documentary that's coming out about it. It might have already been released. I know that they were doing this back in 2024. But, you don't have to take my word for it. A quick Google search will tell you all that you need to know, because Dr. Jones is not going to argue with people in the comments about, stuff that's being put out there. And there's a bajillion videos put out there on this topic. So there is that like, some of the other commenters brought up too, that how, the women aren't necessarily being taken advantage of, because that's the old school of thought, like it was in the 80s, which is what I brought up about Eddie Murphy. But now women are getting trained, they're being brought up, learning about these experiences and seeing these experiences as young girls and as young women. And so they're hip to the game. And so basically there's sort of like this teaching of sorts of women, which, it is what it is. And so they're not necessarily this docile woman that's being preyed upon in all situations, if that makes sense. And so I think a good show that's maybe highlighted this in recent years is 90 Day Fiancé. And 90 Day Fiancé is a good show about that whole bait and switch that happens sometimes, but not all the time. So I won't say that this is the case for everybody. And I think the second complaint that I got was, why do you care what I'm trying to do and who I'm invested in and black women, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I'm not personally invested in your choices as a partner. I do not care. The only time that I care, and the only time that I'm going to talk about it on this platform or any of my platforms, is when there's an abuse and predatory dynamic there. The whole premise of Passport Bros was built on a predatory dynamic. Say what you want, argue with someone else about it, But the whole premise of it was I can go, I'm tired of American women. They're individualized, they're free thinkers, they expect too much. Here, I can go and get an economically advantaged woman that's not going to necessarily know the language, and that I can have power over this woman. I could tell her what to do, and she's going to do it. And once again, I go back to our friend Eddie Murphy, who talked about this phenomenon in the 80s. So if you don't want to listen to me, go back and watch Raw, and he's going to tell you all about it. I'm sure there's other comedians, but that's just the one that stands out in my mind. Other comedians, other platforms, blah, blah, blah. So again, I'm not personally invested in who or what dates who or whatever. That's not my business. You're grown, do what grown people do. And I say that all the time on this platform and all the others. And then, there was the whole thing about marriage. Someone was asking questions about marriage. Again, a Google search, because it's surprising a lot of people are asking, you need to provide statistics and blah, blah, blah. TikTok doesn't pay me, so I'm not your paid for hire researcher. I just simply state things, put it out there, but it's actually already out there. And so again, I go back to people think that they're going to get someone that's docile, easily controllable. And when these women, become individualized, free thinkers, they become more Americanized. But even prior to becoming Americanized, I go back to now what the other commenters were saying, that these women are not docile. They put that on, but it's really a whole bait and switch. So the getter is getting got, is all I was simply trying to say. And so, again, do what you want. Be free to do whatever you want, except when it comes to trying to prey on young people. One of the things that I've learned in my career in working with a lot of narcissistic people love to be egotistical and feel like they have power over others. But however, it's their ego that will get them in a trouble. And very similar to honey trapping, there's other phenomenons where narcissistic people get themselves in trouble because of their ego, and they get themselves caught up in something that they can't get themselves out of, simply because they won't listen. They think that they are above everyone else and that they are immune to danger. And unfortunately, this is a very similar phenomenon that's happening. When you have something where you feel like you can go and take advantage of someone for sex, or because you want to easily control them and make them your personal slave, so turn around, what do they say? Turnabout is fair play. So people are quickly finding out that it isn't what they thought it was. And it's unfortunate because there's all this sort of slandering of women on both sides, both of the foreign women and both on the American women. American women are this and that and the other. I don't want to put up with that. And then, they think that they're going to get better, when actually they may get worse, more than what they bargained for, is all I'm trying to say. But, do what makes you happy. But what I'm finding interesting is that, I make these posts. Hit dogs always holler the loudest, as the saying goes. So it's interesting that you want to fight about it. But, the next time you go, if you want to, kind of come back to this post and leave us a comment and let us know how your next trip goes, more power to you. I'm glad to listen. Thanks so much for watching. And lastly, I want to respond to the person that put this post. Yes, you're right. Military, and there's a lot of people, that were born out of military men that were essentially doing the same thing, going to places like the Philippines. But there's also, again, a long documented history of these men also raping women and young girls over in those villages and things like that. And I'm not saying all, but yes, this is something this is a cultural phenomenon that's been going on for many, many years. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate your post, your comment. And lastly, one last thing I will say about honey trapping. Cardi B actually publicly spoke out about how she used to honey trap men, set men up with the idea or under the premise of sex, only to turn around and have them robbed. So this is not a new phenomenon.